Okay, I'm Jason Palker. I'm an attorney based down in the Valley. I definitely want to thank Sean, Cal, everybody for inviting me. I actually came here last year after going to several different conferences, and this is the only conference I actually learned stuff at. So after coming last year, I reached out to Cal, I reached out to Sean, and I said, hey, give me a chance to get on stage. I got some stuff I want to say. So thank you for letting me come. What I wanted to talk about today is really burden shifting in insurance policies. And we'll get into that in a second, but I wanted to start by kind of highlighting where my firm is based and the unique clients that we represent. Oh, there's the screen. Okay. Well, yeah, so my firm, primarily, we're based down in the Valley. Our main office is in Edinburgh, Texas. Demographically, it's a very unique part of the country. I'd say about 98% of our cases are first-party storm damage cases. Obviously, we do fires, we do pipe bursts and stuff like that, but the vast majority of what we do is first-party insurance claims. Unlike a lot of the other firms here over the past few days, most of what we do is residential. I will also say that in the Valley, the cost of labor is a lot cheaper than it is in places like Dallas or Houston, those larger markets. I know it's not at all uncommon for roofs to run 30 to 50 grand throughout the state, whereas down in the Valley, realistically, most people are getting their roofs replaced on their houses for 4 to 7 grand. Raise your hand if you're a public adjuster. Would you take a case where you're only making 10% of 7 grand? Honestly. Lawyers, anyone? Not too many people want to take those cases. And that's very unfortunate for a lot of our clients. A little bit about myself. I've been working storm damage claims since the 2012 hailstorms down in Hidalgo County. And by the way, if my voice cracks, I'm sorry. I went really hard on karaoke last night. So basically from 2012 through 2020, I worked at a few different law firms down in the Valley. I would describe them as sign them up and refer them out kind of law firms. Not particularly excited about a lot of the work that I did there, but I did learn a lot and took every opportunity that I could to grow while I was there. But in 2020, I decided to start my own firm, basically because I thought the clients down in my neck of the woods really needed good representation. Our unofficial motto is, don't hire a car crash lawyer to handle a storm damage case. Raise your hand in this room if you've ever referred a case to a lawyer that did not have a clue what they were doing in storm damage. Yep. Okay, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. All right. So I wanted to talk about the Valley just a little bit. Right? Raise your hand if you know what the official language of the United States is. Fun fact, it's not English. The United States has declared we don't have a national language. But down in the Valley, we speak a lot of Spanish. Little history on the state of Texas. 1500s to 1600s, the vast majority of the state of Texas was colonized by the Spaniards. 1821, Mexico gained independence from Spain. And then the 1820s to the 1830s, the vast majority of Texas was not populated by anyone. It was Native Americans. And it was actually the country of Mexico incentivized empresarios like Steve Austin to bring people in from the United States. They were offering them hundreds, even thousands of acres to just come and set up shop, work the land, and basically hold the land for Mexico. They didn't want Native Americans taking the land back. They didn't want the U.S. to absorb Texas, and that's kind of the history there. So 200 years ago really wasn't that long ago. Texas Revolution happened, Republic of Texas was formed, and then later Texas joined the Confederacy and then merged back into the U.S. But that, in a nutshell, is the history of Texas. And so what we've got is major landowners throughout the state of Texas have held on to their land for generations, and it's not that many generations. Take a place like Fredericksburg. Anyone been to Fredericksburg? It's a weird little German pocket in the state of Texas. It's weird. The Valley is very similar in that regard. The Valley is very, 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 very Mexican. And so along the border, the culture has stayed the same. The Spanish language has remained predominant, even as our population has grown. If I want to go get my hair cut, my barber doesn't speak English. She's a doll, though. I love Betsy. If I want to order food at a restaurant, many, many, many places, they take our orders in Spanish. Why is this important, and why am I talking about it? Renee made a very good point when she gave her presentation, talking about the 2012 hailstorms down in the valley. She kind of painted a picture that 90% of claims down there in 2012 were getting denied, whereas claims up in DFW had substantially lower rates of denials. And the reason why, language barrier, that's the number one reason. We don't have a national language in the US, but every insurance policy is written in English. Even educated attorneys very often can argue about what an insurance policy says. You take people who can't read, write in English, and you present them with a denial letter. They don't understand a word that's in that letter. All that they understand is they're not getting paid, right? There's no check in that envelope. And what we see a lot in our roughly 70% Spanish-speaking population is people tend to just roll over and take it. They don't have formal education. They're very proud. They're not litigious. They don't want to hire lawyers. They don't want to get dragged into the court system. And ultimately, insurance companies know that. They've known that for decades, and they keep denying everybody. So, some more important things about my neck of the woods. Contractors are not sophisticated. Levi, do you agree? Levi's one of the good ones down there. They're not proficient in Xactimate. Virtually every contractor I know has never used Xactimate. They have either no familiarity or very limited working proficiency with insurance claims. You start talking to them about appraisal, they've never heard of it. You start talking about supplementing their claims, they don't know about it. Talk about ACV, RCV, big deductibles, they don't know it. And it's very difficult for a contractor who doesn't understand any of this to explain it to a person who can't even read their denial letter. Also, a lot of contractors down there don't even speak English. We also have a lack of public adjusters. I asked all the PAs in the room, raise your hand if you'd take a $4,000 roof claim. Y'all don't want them. Well, guess what? We don't have that many PAs in the valley. Now, we actually just had a few massive storms. If anyone wants to go down there, food is great. It's a lot of fun. But there are a lot of commercial properties that some PAs are flocking to right now. But nobody really wants to help on the residential stuff. Usually on these residential cases, if somebody was fully adjusted for all their damage, we're talking a scope of 7 to 15 grand RCV. That same exact scope in DFW would be 30 to 50. And then ultimately what it boils down to is we've got a real issue with lack of competent representation down there. I know every single attorney who has presented or is going to present has tried at least one storm damage case. In the entire valley, not a single attorney down there has tried a storm damage case, except me. Most attorneys, I've talked to a lot of them, most attorneys toss every residential loss into appraisal. That's it. They'll pick up the phone, they'll call the adjuster, they'll see if they can burn and turn a quick settlement, and if they can't, they toss it into appraisal. Collect the depreciation, maybe get $1,000 or $2,000 for their fees. They take 40%, they take the case expenses, they give the client what's left. Client's got nothing. $1,000, $2,000, check in the mail from their lawyer. They can't replace the roof, and then a few years later they file another claim, and that one gets denied because they never made the repairs. What we also see a lot from lawyers down in the valley is they're terrified of federal court. Raise your hand if you know what diversity jurisdiction is. Okay, a couple. Victor, raise your hand higher. You're a lawyer, damn it. So diversity of jurisdiction is basically if you've got an out-of-state insurance company and you've got more than $75,000 in dispute, that insurance company can remove any lawsuit to federal court. Actually, it was Renee also who put some case law up there on some hot topic issues going on in appraisal right now. Most of the bad opinions that are bad for everyone in this room come out of federal court. The judges actually take the time to read and write their orders, whereas in state court, usually we write the orders for them and they just sign them. Lots of bad case law. Usually you don't want to be in federal court. I don't mind it though. But what a lot of lawyers do, and frankly, the law firms that I was working at for 8 years before I started my own, is we would sign stipulation of damages. We would make the client sign a one-page document that says, I will never seek more than 75 grand. You file that, you keep it in state court. Problem is, there are a lot of people who got 30 or 40 grand genuinely in dispute, and you're signing away their right to treble damages just to keep it in state court, just to burn and turn a quick settlement at a mediation. The problem is, if they're not going to make you a reasonable offer, what are you going to do? Try the case? You get an award, you get a jury verdict for treble damages, and you can't even collect on it because you stipulated? That's happening all across the valley, and actually it happens a lot throughout the state. Generally, the firms that get better results on cases down there sign stuff up and refer it out. I can actually say it was frustrating for me as an associate when we would kind of throw everything into a box.com and send it to John Black. I mean, it kind of was what it was. When I started my firm, I basically decided we were never going to invoke appraisal on any case unless there was a strategic need for it. Thank you. It's very, very, very rare that we will, but when we do, it's because there is a strategic need for it. And I could give examples, but I'd be talking for a while. We actually litigate 90% of our caseload. There are a few, very, very limited few insurance companies that if you send them a demand letter, they'll actually pay it. It's very rare, and sometimes clients just don't want lawsuits to get filed, and they want a quick settlement. But I'd say about 90% of what we sign up ends up with a lawsuit. We don't talk about getting treble damages at trial, we actually do it. And in less than 3 years, my firm set a record judgment for the largest residential storm damage judgment in the history of the Valley. Usually it takes 2 to 3 years to get to trial. This was an example. We just tried this case in January. This is what a case actually looks like when it goes the distance. I don't think this has a laser on it, but that's what we got. $233,000 on a 40-square roof with a few water stains. This is the full scope of damages estimated by our expert, full award of treble damages, full award of interest. They appealed it. Right now, they've already posted bond over $1 million. That was a 40-square roof in Alton, Texas. If that had gone through appraisal, we probably would have got a check in the mail for 20 grand. Honestly, truly. This was a lawyer wanting to settle the night before trial. Hey, what's your number? I think your last demand was 57 grand. That was at a pre-lit mediation. I said a lot more than that. All right, so that's the Valley, that's my firm, that's what I do. I wanted to talk about a few wacky cases, because I like wacky cases. I think everyone in this room is going to enjoy some of these cases. These are some recent cases that we've had over the last couple of years that I have a lot of fun talking about. So fun facts about these cases. None of these were commercial losses. We obtained consideration on all 3 of these for bad faith. And all 3 of these cases were rejected by another law firm before I signed them up. That's what makes these so much fun. Okay. This can be an open discussion. What do y'all think is going on here? Anybody? Cosmetic damages, Nailed it, okay. That's what the roof looks like. So this was the carrier's engineering report. The carrier sent out, I think it was Rimkus. If not, I mean, they're all the same. But that was the engineer's photo. Termination of stucco finish at roof. they're saying the water's coming in right there. Water's coming in right there. Water's coming in right there. Water's coming in there. And let me go back. Okay, so fun fact about this particular storm. This was a storm, I believe, in July of 19 or 20. It rained for 3 straight days, nonstop. It was something like 21 inches of rain fell in 3 days. The flooding throughout the valley, insane. We're talking 4 feet of water in people's houses in Donna, Texas. There was no wind, 0 wind. Wind speeds, peaks, 15, 20 miles an hour, 0 wind. This was filed as a wind claim because all of this property started having interior water damage. The stucco walls were falling off. There was no wind. What was happening on this flat roof with all of this rain was literally 2 to 3 feet of water was just sitting on top of this roof. It wasn't draining properly, and water was getting in through there, or through there. I'm pointing here, but over there. So they denied this claim on 3 bases. One, they said there was no storm-created opening, so they denied the interior water damage. They said what they always say, wear and tear, deterioration, settling, blah, blah, blah. And then ultimately they said this is a construction defect. And here's the fun fact. It was a construction defect. This was not flashed properly. All the water was getting in there. That was a construction defect. It was not wind. Here's where we got wacky. Okay, so this is what another lawyer did. She had an estimate for $200,000, which included a full roof replacement, full scope for all the interior water damage, replacing all the exterior stucco that was falling off the building. She sent a demand for over $500,000. Carrier said, here's our engineering report. Installation defects on the roof caused all the damage to the interior and the stucco, which was true, and there was no damage to the roof. So what she did was she said, well, shit, I'm not going to be able to get anything on this. Let me just make it about the roof. She got a new report just for the roof, about $50,000 for a replacement. She sent a revised demand. Carrier offered $2,500, and lawyer said, I need to get rid of this case. Rejected the case. Now, what would you guys do if you were working on this file? Just shout out any ideas. What would you do?
Look for an actual storm-created opening.
That's one thing. Well, more importantly, how about we read the policy? That's an important thing here because this claim was denied because there was no wind damage. All this water came in due to a construction defect. No one's disputing it. The funnest thing about this case is I agreed with every word in the engineer's report. So read the policy, then get a little wacky. Okay, let's start with the limits. This was back-to-back duplexes. It was a little fourplex. About $400,000 in coverage. This was a broad form policy. We all know the difference, named peril versus broad form. So broad form, everything is covered unless it is explicitly limited or excluded from coverage. Meaning any damage for anything is covered unless there's something in the policy that says it's not. I like broad form policies. This is what I really want to talk about today is burden shifting. So as long as you can show that there's damage, you've met your first burden on a broad form policy. Then the burden shifts to the insurance company to say, here's an exclusion or a coverage limitation. If they satisfy that, the burden goes back to you to find an exception, what people usually call loopholes, right? Okay, so talking about the first reason they denied coverage, the storm-created opening issue. We will not pay for loss of or damage to property as described and limited in this section, blah, 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 if the damage is caused by or resulting from rain, unless the building or structure first sustains a covered cause of loss to its roof or walls. Looking at those photos, looking at everything we had in this case, I don't know how we get past this. We needed to find a covered cause of loss to trigger that interior water damage coverage. That was the first one. First lawyer that had this case gave up on that. Wear and tear, deterioration, and settling. What is wear and tear? If the policy doesn't define a term, what do we use? Dictionary. The common ordinary use of that word is what definition we're going to apply. Wear and tear, according to Webster's, is something that occurs long term. It happens over time. This was a sudden and accidental loss that occurred over the course of 2 or 3 days during a storm. Now, settling, I want to talk about this, and I'm sure the lawyers in this room would love to talk a lot more about this with concurrent causation issues, but in a nutshell, settling was not the cause of loss. What we really had going on in this case with the stucco walls falling off of this property, we had poor construction and materials on the roof and rain on the roof. That water started percolating down the walls, which led to that cracking in the walls, which also led to interior water damage. The actual cause of this loss was bad construction on this roof. They deny the settling, but the settling was not the cause of the loss. The settling itself was the damage. So let's talk about the construction defect. This was the last one, and this is where I had a lot of fun. We will not pay for loss or damage caused by or resulting from any of the following, but if an excluded cause of loss that is listed in 3A through 3C results in a covered cause of loss, we will pay. That right there, faulty, inadequate, or defective design, materials, maintenance. They denied it on that basis, and they were right. Here's the loophole. This policy had coverage for collapse. Have y'all ever seen one of these coverages? Y'all ever filed a claim for collapse? You ever filed a claim for collapse on exterior stucco walls falling off a building? This gets fun. So, this was a covered cause of loss in the policy. Abrupt falling down or caving in of a building or any part of a building, with the result being that the building or part of the building cannot be occupied for its intended purpose. This was a rental property. Tenants started moving out. Is that any part of a building falling down or caving in? We found a covered cause of loss. So we will pay if such collapse is caused by one or more of the following: use of defective materials or methods in construction, remodeling, or renovation if the abrupt collapse occurs after the construction remodeling is complete, but only if the collapse is caused in part by weight of rain that collects on a roof. This was fun. I had a lot of fun. Okay, so what did we not do? We didn't reduce our estimate from $200,000 down to $50,000 after seeing that an exclusion obvious applied. We didn't reject the case with only a $2,500 offer. We didn't even spend money hiring an engineer. I used their own engineering report. We didn't spend money or time taking depositions, doing discovery. We didn't have to. I filed a deck action. A court read that engineering report, read the policy. We won. So we read the policy, we established coverage, we determined what exclusions and limitations the carrier was citing as their basis for denying the claim. Once we identified those, we found the exceptions. In this case, the coverage for collapse was a loophole. It was a covered cause of loss that triggered every other coverage. We got 6 figures above policy limits on that case. It was a settlement. Y'all like that one? Yes. Yes? Y'all want another one? Yeah. All right. Okay. Improperly installed tile roof. Raise your hand if you've worked with lots of tile roofs. Okay. Code. Let's talk code real quick. Generally, code requires a fastener on every single tile, correct? Not just on the ridge. Let me go back real quick. This particular roof, every single tile on this roof was locked into the tile next to it, above it, below it, whatever. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. They all locked into each other, but not a single tile on this roof was nailed into the decking other than the ridge. They were all held onto the roof by the weight of each other. And what happened was some of this ridge blew off, and then a bunch of the other tiles started to shift around as a result. This was during Hurricane Hannah. The ridge tiles were nailed. First row of tiles had nails. Every other tile did not have a nail. Shout it out. Why do you think the carrier denied this claim? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I pulled the specs on the tile. That was the tile. Found it on Google. Right there, the weight of the tile. Y'all see that little highlighting, 6.1? These tiles weigh 6 pounds each. What I did here was, the carrier did open coverage. They estimated for a few ridge cap tiles that were blown off, and they said, okay, you have a covered cause of loss limited to this, but we're not gonna pay to re-roof the entire roof because it's improperly installed. That's why it's damaged. I pulled the code on this. Code requires, oh, let me go back. Where was it? Oh, I can barely see on this thing. Y'all see that arrow right there? Okay. Tiles with installed weight less than 9 pounds per square require a minimum of 1 fastener per tile regardless of roof slope. That's what the code requires. These morons opened coverage on this roof. Once they acknowledged that there was a covered cause of loss, this roof had wind damage and it was covered. The only issue now becomes, what is the proper scope and method of repair? I know Steve Bush probably wants to talk concurrent causation. That's a whole other issue, but they opened coverage. In theory, this could be resolved in appraisal now. What's the right scope and method of repair here? So, remember burden shifting. Once we prove that damage happened and it was covered, it's the carrier's burden to prove that an exception or limitation applies. And then we have to find a loophole. Here, they were pretty much denying the full scope of the roof based on this bad installation, but that was not the cause of the loss. The cause of the loss was wind, and they acknowledged it. They put it in writing. They just disputed the scope. What we ended up doing was, we got an engineer report, we pulled the scope, or pardon me, we pulled the weight on each of these individual tiles, and we said, look, now that you've opened up coverage, maybe we don't need to do a full roof replacement. Maybe we can reuse a lot of these tiles, but what we do need to do, if anyone is gonna put their hands on this roof and fix what is broken, fix what is lost, fix those little ridge cap tiles that blew off, they need to do it properly and according to code. This policy actually had that O&L coverage. So what we were able to do, by pulling the weight of those tiles and proving the code that applied, the carrier ended up paying 6 figures. And this was not the biggest roof. It was 70 squares with some minor interior damage, $15,000 deductible. They paid out 6 figures on it real quick. Okay, y'all want a wacky water loss? This is a fun one. Y'all ever worked a slab leak? Y'all have fun with them? Okay, so this particular claim, this is a client out in El Paso. He bought a house. And like every 2 or 3 months, pipe burst. As it turns out, the plumbing throughout his entire house was done with defective pipes from Mexico. They were discontinued and they just kept bursting. This guy basically redid all of the plumbing in his entire house. But initially, he was doing it all through his home warranty. He bought the house, he had a bunch of vouchers, they sent out plumbers, and every time he had to do one of these repairs, home warranty covered it. He had a $75 copay. Problem is, for his foundation, he had a policy limit of $500. So every little pipe burst that he had, home warranty would pay for it. They wouldn't really pay for much of anything on his slab leak. So he filed an insurance claim. And it was actually really funny what they did. There's his home warranty. So he filed his insurance claim. I can't say who it was with because we signed some papers, but he brought a few different plumbing companies out. They thought they identified where the slab was leaking. Turns out they were wrong. Oh, I did leave travelers in there. Oops. Stop recording. Okay, well, whatever. So what happened here was he filed the claim. This was during COVID. Initially, some insurance company said, we're not going to send an adjuster out. What we're going to do is we're going to do a FaceTime with you. We'll do a FaceTime with you, and you walk around the property and you show us the damages, and we'll write up an estimate. Like, dude, it's a slab leak. What is he going to show them? He filed his claim. He did his FaceTime, and then this is the letter that he got. Travelers determined your policy does not cover damage from water loss because there is no direct physical damage, and as a result of a sudden and accidental water discharge. Since there is no demonstrable physical damage, we're denying your claim. Demonstrable physical damage. He spent over 17 grand on repairs. He had to bring out multiple companies. He had to redo a lot of this plumbing under his foundation. 17 grand. Is that damage? Is that demonstrable damage? 17 grand in damage. He called them begging, send somebody out. We're digging under my house. I keep doing all these repairs. I'm spending all this money. Just send somebody. A FaceTime isn't going to work. They sent somebody out, finally. Our research found that water never manifested itself above the foundation and did not cause any direct physical water damage. Since there is no direct physical water damage, your policy does not provide coverage. He hired a PA. PA wrote up a $122,000 estimate. That was rejected. Client signed up with me. He actually signed up with another lawyer first. Lawyer said, I don't see any damage. Here we go. So let's talk burden shifting again. This policy was a broad form policy. If we can show that there is damage, that triggers coverage. Now the burden shifts over to the carrier to find a reason to deny the claim, an exclusion or a limitation. Why did the carrier deny this claim? What exclusion did they cite? Obviously, you only know what I showed you, but the fact is, they didn't actually cite any exclusion. No exclusion, no limitation, no nothing. They just said, we don't see any damage. That's why they denied the case. That's why they denied this claim. The fact is, we showed damage. We showed $17,000 in receipts that they refused to adjust for. They refused to provide any basis in the policy for not paying this claim. They just said, we don't see water. Here's what his patio looked like in his backyard before he started doing work. Does that look like damage? In order to actually do this repair, is that damage? That's damage. Is that damage? Is that damage? He had to redo a lot of pipes throughout his house. I'm not a plumber. I'm not going to pretend I am, but as I understand it, the slab leak created some kind of pressure that caused a whole bunch of other pipes to burst. That's damage. That's damage. 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 More damage. Okay, so nothing in the policy required that water had to manifest itself. Nothing said it had to be visible. Nothing said it had to actually wet his walls or his ceiling or anything like that. There's no exclusion in this policy for why they denied this claim. They just said, we don't see damage. So, again, all risk policies, everything is covered unless they provide you with an exclusion or a limitation. So what do you think happened here? 17 grand out of pocket, that's what he spent. We can demand mental anguish. We can demand attorney's fees and interest and everything. We settled this for 6 figures. 2 other law firms signed this case up and rejected it because they didn't see any damage. I had fun with this. Okay, that's all I got. Is Joe in this room? Joe Gibson? No. Okay, well, that's an old photo. Anyways, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute...